so many poems. I have so many poems. As you can tell by the last clip, I have a lot of poems. And not only that, I have a lot of copies of a lot of poems. Because since I'm doing the masters and I'm in workshop classes, every week you are submitting a new poem and you are printing out, depends from class to class, but like more than 10 copies of every single poem. Some poems have multiple pages. And then you receive back all of those copies with feedback and opinions. For the most part, they all coincide, but some of them very differ from one another. And then the thing is that I struggle to pick and choose the voices and opinions that I want to keep. I mean, in the long run, I learn who are my readers and what I'm looking for, and it becomes easier, but I save every single piece of feedback. So then when I have days like today that I'm trying to organize everything, it's just so much. Organizing poems or just writing in general when it's like many different parts, because for example for my novel, yes, it's multiple chapters but they all belong to one project, so it's easier. But I'm making a poetry collection, need to submit a first version of this book by August. In my head I'm giving myself August 1st sort of deadline. He didn't specify, so it means that I have a little more than a month. So yeah, cannot believe I'm going into my last year, but that's where we're at right now. And buy a new notebook, because the one that I'm using right now for this project is almost done, and I think I want to start a new one, just because before I feel that I was just writing in a sense of wandering around and see what could happen, but now it's like, okay, we need to actually dial down together a book. But yeah, that is all. It's also kind of gloomy outside, which I love, but when I'm trying to be productive, that just brings my whole energy down. I just want to be on the couch reading my book.
I left the hall light on in case you come back home. I sent a text that I was wrong. Oh, won't you come back home? Why won't you come back home?
It's raining outside. Let's talk about books. As part of this thesis process, one of the steps or requirements is that we need to create a reading list. These books are going to inform the book that you're writing for your thesis, but also they need to be tied together to form a hypothetical class that you're presenting and defending on your thesis defense. The list that I have right now in the books that I'm about to talk about and the order I'm talking about them and all of that does not have to do with that final list or that final version of that. I really focus more on that towards the end. Right now, these are just books that I want to read or revisit as part of this whole process. This is, I guess, my personal reading list, but also many of this would probably end up in that reading list. I can talk, there are a lot of things that I keep on trying to talk about in here about my master's and my thesis process that are, I guess, I mean, all MFAs share a similar process, but maybe there are things that are just particular to my school, I don't know. But maybe that's a video I can make for people who are interested in MFA and what do you do for a master's in creative writing and what that looks like. These are the books that are gonna help me write the book that I'm writing, my poetry collection. I have like kind of 3-ish piles to this. I have books that I have already read and I know that they are helpful to me and I want to revisit because maybe I haven't read them in a long time, or maybe I just want to take all of those ideas back. Some books I'm in the middle of, or I've been reading for a long time and I just need to finish, or I'm currently reading kind of, and then others I haven't read, but I think they're gonna help me. I think I want to start with the books that I'm reading right now, just because this book I'm showing in this video already. I'm reading Madrid, a new biography by Luke
Stegemann.
It's a German last name, Luke Stegemann. And this is basically an encyclopedia of the city. You get the whole history of Madrid, or at least most of the history. It goes from the Iron Age to the current present, and it's fascinating. There's so many things, so much research that has gone into this. I thought I knew a historical aspect, or I thought I knew something about a place, and then he shows me even more about that, or that place that I didn't even know that was part of it. That has been fascinating. The other thing that I like about him is that he's not Spanish. He's just very fascinated by the city, and he wrote this book. Yeah, he's an ordinary Madrileño. Like, I love that because that's me as well. It's really nice to see how someone else was also driven by that love of a place and decided to write a whole book. Only that his is like history, mine is just my poems. Then the other book that I'm currently reading is Un Poeta en Nueva York by Federico García Lorca. And this one I'm reading mainly because I just need culture. Because I tend to read mostly in English, I started even reading just to help me learn the language. I'm missing a lot of culture, a lot of Spanish culture when it comes to literature. So I had this book that I bought one of the times that I went to Madrid, and I hadn't read it, mainly because of Garcia Lorca's images and language is so dense with everything that it becomes kind of hard to read, in the sense of like, I know what every single word means. Obviously Spanish is my first language, but he's just so masterful that I'm like, wow. And it's been a slow read. I'm here, but it has been really nice to read about him and his period, which I'm excited to get to in this book. He and other poets are called the generation of the 27th of 1927, and it's basically this whole group of students, our students, that study in Madrid. Funny enough, he's not from Madrid, but some of his education was there. And then this book he wrote when he went to Colombia in New York for a year. But basically in Madrid in 1927 there was this group of poets that are called Los Poetas del 27, and they are regarded as kind of being a new force and a new wave to poetry and what that meant, and kind of reinventing the art. Really fascinating. I've been liking what I've been able to get about this. Has been so rewarding that I want to go ahead and read more of them, and I think it'll be helpful. I've been trying to look for someone of this era that is from Madrid and writing about Madrid in specific, which has been kind of hard because they tend to write more, what I always tend to say, more important poems, like more political and more about humanity, and they're kind of breaking away from the city, not lovers of the city kind of thing. At least he tends to like more the rural and more natural places, and he tends to criticize, in this case, New York for just industrial nature of being a city. And then I'm gonna go ahead to books that I have already read, just because I know that these are helpful. 2 non-fiction memoir-ish books. I mean, this is more a memoir, this is more philosophical, but I'll start with this. Flâneuse by Elkin is a memoir that is the blueprint for what I want my poetry collection to be. The term flâneuse is the female term for flaneur, and they are French terms. Flaneur came to be in the 19th century, and it basically means like a man who walks the city, because at the time women couldn't just go ahead and walk by themselves without being accompanied by a man. So this man would just stroll the cities, Paris in specific, and just marvel at the beauty of the architecture and the landscape and paintings, and just enjoy that. And that is basically what I'm doing with my poetry collection. I'm just most of the time just walking and talking about the places that I'm walking. And Elkin wrote this memoir called Flâneuse, and the term came a little later, of women kind of taking on revenge and saying we can also walk by ourselves and be philosophical about places. And as you can tell by all of those tabs, I adore this book. I love how she mixes her personal history and the places she has been. She talks about Paris, New York, Tokyo, Venice, and London. And she also adds segments about women who have been there, who have been artists. She talks about writers, directors, specifically having to do with writing mostly. And she blends in their lives with her life and is beautiful. And I honestly want to reread this regardless, so I know it will be really helpful to read it again and see that initial fire of what I want to do with this. And honestly, if you're a woman in your 20s, read this. This kind of reminds me of Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton, in the sense of it's just the awakening of a woman and learning about the world as she is engaging with it, but it does have that added historical sense of feminism and womanhood, which I think it's so helpful for anyone to read, especially if you're a girl in your 20s. This is perfect. And then I have The Art of Travel. This one I read for class, and because I read it for class, I read it quicker than I wish I did, because I had the deadline of you need to read it by a certain day, and this is so dense in details and ideas and so many new perceptions about the way that we travel and what traveling means. There's so many ideas in here that I would underline and say, like, I want to read a poem from this perspective, or talking about this point right here. I haven't gotten back to it since I finished that class, so little homework that I need to do right here. And then I have, as part of the nonfiction, Satori in Paris by Kerouac. And this book I read actually when I last went to Madrid. It's a journal-like account of Kerouac going to Paris to uncover some family heritage kind of thing, but it becomes such a stream of consciousness, and it has so many ideas about writing that I just think I didn't fully get it, because of it's perfect to read while traveling, but at the same time, because of the natural chaos of traveling, I don't think I was giving it my full attention. And it's so short, and I have some underlines, and I honestly don't really remember it, so I think it'll be helpful and good to go back to it, because I do remember there was like a point of finding a place in a different place, kind of like saying that you are able to find a piece of New York in Paris, for example. And something like that he said that I remember was very like, oh yeah, but I don't fully remember what it was. I just want to go back to it. Probably I won't fully reread this, but more so like look through my annotations and read some of it. But this is also on my list. And then moving to poetry, these 3 poetry collections are for sure in my reading list. Actually, let me change my battery. 1 second. Sorry if the frame changed too much. It was going to die. The poetry. I have this is fun. I have one by one of my professors, and then one by a poet that graduated years before me from the same program, and I think had the same committee that I have now, so that's fun. And then I have one by a new poet. I mean, he's not new. He's just new to me, and his collection was amazing. But let me start with the one from my professor. This is Directions to the Beach of the Dead by Richard Blanco. It's his second book, and when he wrote it, he had that epiphany of, I'm just gonna travel until I find myself. And so the poems go to all of these places with the question of, when you see other people and you're like, should I move here? Could that be my life? Should I stay here? And then you find people that you love in certain places. You wonder with the what if kind of it all, and just love that. This is probably my favorite poetry collection I have ever read. I love it so much that, again, this is another one of those that I want to reread regardless. Then I have All of My Heroes Are Broke by Ariel Francisco. Ariel Francisco graduated from the same program as I did. Just marvel at the fact that this was someone's thesis. The first half of this book takes place in New York City, and the second half of this takes place in Miami. And the way that he constructs those cities and the people in them is just so real and magnificent, and he doesn't over romanticize anything. And that is something that I sometimes struggle with. I tend to be too romantic of a viewer. I read this on my Kindle, and I always say that I'm more of a fiction reader than a poetry reader, and that I should be more of a poetry reader because I'm writing a whole book of poems as my thesis, but I just struggle to be as engaged as I am with a novel. This book, I started it at midnight and I thought, oh, on my Kindle, which I also I am much more of a physical copy than an ebook reader. So those two things were like, oh, I'm sure I'm just gonna read like the first 3 points of this, and then I'm just going to go to bed and wait until my physical copy arrives. I stayed up until 2 a.m. reading this book of poems in my Kindle, unheard of. Actually, that's the only book I have finished on my Kindle, and had never stayed up reading poetry like that, like one collection. Then I have Staying Still, and this is actually an arc. This comes out September 1st. September, enero, febrero, marzo, abril, mayo, junio, julio, agosto, septiembre. Yeah, September 1st. Look up pronunciation. Very sorry.
Poems by Nguyen.
Nguyen. This is Staying Still by Nguyen. This book. Honestly, these 3 are my favorite poetry collections ever. All 3 of them follow similar questions, which makes sense since they're on this reading list and they're for my book. But this book, you see that cover? This is the perfect cover for this book because it very much feels like, you know, that sensation. There's a name for this when you realize that you could be living any of those other lives. Like the one that you have right now is not the only option, and there are like multiple options out there. And the fear that can sometimes steal on you. So the Staying Still title is just amazing. But this is his second collection, I believe. And how do I even put this into words? This is just beautiful. Like beautiful language, beautiful observations, heartbreaking in the best way. I love heartbreaking books. Let me just read you some of the questions that it has on the back. It centers on the questions of how do our anxieties around the idea of belonging estrange us from the very word we seek to belong in? How impossible does it feel to stay still and face ourselves? And then I have 3 more books that are on the I need to read pile. 2 of them I have started all 3 of this. It's just I started them while I was in class, so a lot. Since we're in poetry land, I'm gonna talk about this book of poems, which is also by one of my professors. This is 20th or XX Poems for the 20th Century by Campbell McGrath. And again, just to tie it all back, I would like to point out that he was a professor when this professor joined the program, and then there were colleagues, like both professors in the same program, and then this poet came in and was a student of both, and now I've been a student of both. Again, I'm just a sentimental girl and I like that. This book, I stopped right here. I need to finish it. This is a book about the 20th century, and there are 100 poems, 1 per year. Actually, what is 1927? Is there something for that I was saying of the poets? Because the fun thing about this is that it travels to so many places. Yeah, this is not... No, it's not. Something else. It's like, how do you contain a year in 1 poem? He answers this question right here. He talks a lot about Picasso. The way that he talks about him as a historical figure, but also as a regular human, but also the way that he controls the historical context he was in and the art he was creating is just magnificent, and something that I would like to do with some of my poems for some figures, or maybe not something I would like to do, but just something that is inspiring to me. And some of the art and references that he touches upon here are things that I'm writing about. This one painting by Picasso, Guernica, and this is in a museum in Madrid, Reina Sofia, and this is just important for Spanish history, and I'm writing about that painting in one of my poems, and he has a poem here talking about a painting. And obviously such different poems, like what he does here is just mind-blowing, amazing. He's just so smart. Like The Only Street in Paris by Elaine Sciolino. This is an account of her time living in Rue de Martins. This one street in Paris. I have read her other book that is about the Seine. I'm never sure how to pronounce the river, but the river that runs across Paris. And I adore that book. That is also another book that could easily be on this list. And it kind of reminds me as well of Flâneuse in the way that they blend the historical and the personal. And this book so far, only this far in, so far it's been the same thing, but this feels even more personal because it's about her time living in this street and the people she met there. One thing that I'm really liking about it is that it's telling you the things that she learned while she was there, but also the things that she has learned looking back at it, which feels very much aligned with what I'm writing and the conclusions that I'm arriving to. I know these things about Madrid and I have written about them, but then I'm reading the biography about the city. I'm learning new cities, so now I'm going into a poem with new information that I didn't even know when I was there. So maybe there's something about a place that I've been, that I wrote about, and then I can say, oh, looking back at it, I just realized that actually that place carried this whole history, so that adds even more weight to what I'm trying to say. And that is something that she's doing in here, and just the way that she writes these places and these quote-unquote characters or just people in them is so charming. The way that she characterizes people on the page is just so human, and like everyone is so unique. Like obviously people in real life, each one is so unique from one another. I really like the way that she's doing it here in a non-fiction way. It is a book that is also beautiful to look at because you get pictures throughout. You also get this with her other book, and again, just like ideas on traveling, a woman traveling in a place that is not her own. Finally, this book, Two Cities by Cynthia Zarin. Zarin, is that how you pronounce it? The question of my life. How do you pronounce this?
Zarin.
Zarin. Two Cities by Cynthia Zarin. This book, I didn't even know it existed. I just saw it at the bookstore and picked it up. It has the emphasis, beautiful word right there. That means like writing that is talking about art, describing it but ruminating on it. This book is within the category of that. Looks like they do multiple phrastic. Yeah, they have like an emphasis series. I didn't even know about this. It says that it was published in 2020. There's a quote in the back that it says, I had come to Venice because I was preparing to break my own heart and I needed another version of love. I love that. Again, this is just multiple books in this list are just women's journeys as travelers and lingering in those places long enough to create a sort of life out of them, even if it's just for a small amount of time, but the way that those places affect them and change the way that they perceive life and the world and even themselves. And sometimes that has to do with love. Most of the times it has to do with self-discovery and defining yourself, how a place can really affect us. I started reading this the day that I got it at the coffee shop, and what I remember is, I remember underlining every single page that I read. Obviously that is great. The bad thing about that is that that also means that the writing was so dense that I need to go back and kind of slow down, because I thought, oh, this is so tiny, I can read this at the cafe in one sitting. I don't think so. It looks like book is gonna make you think, which is what we want. But a slower read because of that.
A significant light, just where it was needed, gleaming black as night, cloistered in injustice, dead in the eye of time. Nobody is losing, faces merchant change, but your face remains the same. The swallows will be
Yesterday I was taking notes / transferring notes that I had already taken in the margins of the book and just kind of organizing everything. When I'm reading something as dense as this book, because it has to do with history and there are a lot of things I don't know, a lot of dates, a lot of names, a lot of just layers upon layers of history, and it's this long, it's hard for me to just read all the way through it. I need to stop and take notes to kind of reinforce what I just learned. If not, it would just go over my head. What I was doing yesterday is that this book is divided in multiple sections depending on the period that it wants to talk about. So I read the first one. This has four, okay, it has 4 sections. I finished the village one, the first one, that is about 100 pages, but 100 pages dense with rich in detail and dates and everything. It goes from the Iron Age to 1516. What I do is that I underline and write things as I go. I also leave little stars. And what I was doing yesterday is that I read all of my underlines and tap the ones that I think are still relevant for my writing in this case. Because there were a lot of details that were very interesting, but some of them kind of stretch farther away from the book. I will go through them, I will read them, and then I will start categorizing my notes. This system really depends from book to book and project to project. The categories that I felt like creating yesterday. One was kind of for the historical facts of just, things that I learned about Madrid. So, for example, I have the remnants of its 9th and 10th century Islamic walls break through the modern cross of the city. That's just a fact, right? I have La Emergenta, which is this highway that is very important for Madrid, but I didn't know that it was also considered part of folk history, kind of simulating the fortress that was once in the Islamic Madrid. Now you have this highway to kind of embody the same thing. Well, you have the Roman roads and how they allowed to then have a template for the modern city. These are just things that are part of history and are there. I like writing them down because a lot of these details won't make it into my writing, but when I'm writing, if I want to pull a detail for something very quickly, I have this cleaner version of the information rather than having to go through all of my tabs. And then the second section that I have was themes, and these are just ideas and reflections that either the writer is posing about Madrid or historians have posted about Madrid and he wrote them down. For example, one line he said, "One nevertheless adds one's own way to the history of the city," meaning, the conception that you have of your own life while you were there also affects the notion of the history of it that you have. So I write that down, and then I have like a little line under it where I start to kind of develop the idea that I have in my head for a possible poem having to do with that, or just leaving myself a note, just saying how I feel about that line. So when I go to write the poem, I remember exactly what direction I wanted to take. Maybe it changes, but I just have it there as guidance. Then I have phrases from other writers and what other people have said about Madrid that he quoted. So Garcia Ortega in Fantasmas del Escribir wrote, "Madrid is a city built by those who arrive to heal wounds, to rise and prosper." Hemingway in Dead in the Afternoon wrote, "Madrid is a strange place. I do not believe anyone likes it much when he first goes there." Then I had a section of concepts, and these are more how I could write a poem in a different way than just the regular line, how can I apply a form or a structure that is slightly different but that it has to do with Madrid and the history. So for example, they were talking about the medieval manuscripts and how cities were portrayed as bodies in that time. So a city would have a head and a heart and limbs, and I don't know how it looks visually, but I made a note that I thought that was cool for me to look it up, and then maybe I can write a poem that looks like a body. These concepts, at least in my head, tend to be more visual. And then finally, I started to list one of places to write about, because I have written about many places in Madrid, but so I'm missing some places, or some places I have slightly touched upon, but I know that I want to dedicate a whole poem to them. So I would write them down, and also alongside the pages where they were mentioned, that it has some sort of good information that can lend itself to a poem. And then finally, people to write about. And these are more historical people, although eventually I'll be adding also like personal people that I know. I had like San Isidro, who's a patron and saint of the city. And then there was this royal couple that was very popular apparently in 1469. I didn't know about them, but I wrote them down just in case I might write about them. Who knows? This is just a list of ideas, so when I'm writing I don't feel like completely lost at sea. Yeah, that's everything that I wrote. What I want to do next is that I want to organize and look through my poems in a categorizing way. This is something that my professor said, to categorize your poems from like A+, B, C, D. Being honest with yourself and what are your stronger poems and what are poems that are good but are not best ones, that sort of system. Just so you have a mindset of what you have in your work already and what is going to, you think, might make it into a book, because you might write 3 poems and 2 of them, yes, could work towards a book, but you're not super happy with them, you don't want them there, you'd rather write something else. Just to have that concept of what I have, because I feel I'm a little lost with that. And once I do that, there are a lot of notes that I took here that could apply to poems that I have already written and in revision. So I just want to leave my little note of like, hey, add this thing that you learned here, or add that other thing there.